If you're in your 30s and you're going, well, I don't know actually what on earth I want to do for the rest of my life. I just knew that it wasn't sitting at that desk in London, looking out the window, thinking I'd rather be somewhere else.
You're someone who's gone on one of life's biggest adventures by taking a complete change of path.
I'd got everything that I wanted, or I thought I had. And it was really scary to think, well, if not this, then what?
Now you are giving back to other people by helping them facilitate the same within themselves. You are a life coach based up here in the peaks, doing something incredibly unique by actually doing some of your coaching out in the wilderness by going for a hike.
People do really know what they want. It's just they're too afraid to face it, to ask it, because they're so far away from where they want to be. Life has become so complicated that they don't know how to unravel it all.
It can be uncomfortable to have the uncomfortable conversations for fear of the upheaval, the consequences of that might have in your life. I mean, I can relate to this. I buried the uncomfortable conversation so many times.
When you're saying things out loud, especially in an outdoor environment, there's so much clarity that comes with that.
Can I put you on the spot? Can I take you back to a time in my life when I felt like I needed coaching the most? What would be your approach for me coming to you?
So I'll start by asking you.
I live a nomadic lifestyle and I'm never in one place for too long. So from time to time, I find it very convenient to order groceries in the form of a Gusto box. I've been using Gusto for nearly 5 years now. It's a delivery company that sends you fresh food and all the ingredients you need to cook delicious meals at home, along with very easy to follow recipe cards. They have over 90 recipes every week, so there really is something for everyone. And so many of their recipes I've returned to again and again because their meals are just delicious. I've got a referral code. I've shared it with so many of my friends. It means they get cheap groceries on their first few boxes and I get credit in return. I'll link it below. Use it to sign up and you get a pretty hefty discount off your first box. There's no subscription required and you can order just one box whenever you want. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me. I love so much that your morning this morning has really encapsulated so much of what your story is that we're going to talk about today. You were just telling me what you did this morning, so for the sake of the recording, please tell me what you did after you woke up.
Well, my plan was to go for a sunrise run. So I set my alarm for about 4 a.m, looked outside. I've got a lovely view straight from the bedroom window. And
this is a view of
the what they call the Great Ridge. Some people laugh at that, say Mantor Ridge.
Yeah, this is in the Kinder region of the Peak District near Edale.
Yeah, so it looks out to this beautiful ridge and Kinder's behind me, Mantor, and everyone knows, a lot of people know Mantor. It's quite an iconic hill as well as Kinder. So I can look out to that ridge and I saw that it was cloudy. I couldn't even see the ridge. It's quite nice on a misty morning sometimes to go running in the mist, but it didn't look like it was going to clear anytime soon or there's nothing really moving. So I went back to sleep and then woke up again around 5 or 6. And then I still had the idea in my head that I wanted to go for a run, especially because I knew we were doing this interview today. And I find that running really helps calm my nerves. It's almost like I have all this energy that's caught up inside me and I need to release it. And so I know that now. I know that about myself and I trust that. I didn't really feel like going for a run this morning, probably because I haven't been the day before. So it felt like a bit of a push, but I knew that it would do me well to arrive here today. So I trusted in that, but I waited because I wanted to feel the sun and to see the views. So I did a bit of work, just sat in my bed, looking out, kept peeking out. And then eventually I got my running stuff on, had a bit of a stretch, and then went out the door. And it's after that I realised, even if I didn't feel like going for a run, once I'm out there, I love it so much. I don't ever question it once I'm out. And running up onto Kinder, the light, after the cloud was clearing, the light was so beautiful. I've just put on social media that when the light is like that, I call it paradise where I live. It's just, everything just is so green, so vibrant. Like, why on earth would I ever question going out? And it really helped me. It really helped me with my day, and it changed my energy. Yeah, and I do this, most days of my life now, even though I still have those doubts and I think, I don't really feel like going. And I don't trust in that. I trust in that it will make me feel better and be such a good start to the day as well.
And this is a run with a difference, because you're not pounding the pavement of the city streets, stopping at traffic lights for pedestrian crossings, fearing for your life as you might cross a road if a car doesn't see you. You're deep in the heart of Edale Valley in the Peak District, in the countryside, in its purest form, where there's pretty much only nothing but trails.
Yeah, and actually my running began in London. I mean, I ran when I was doing my GCSEs at school, and that got me through my GCSEs. There's something about it. Again, it's about nerves. It's about confidence. It really helped me when I was living in Norfolk. So I used to study really hard, go for a break, go for a run. And then I started again when I was living in London. And I loved the pavements then. My knees didn't. But I loved running, going out at 6 a.m. before going to work. And that really set up my day as well. But then I started going out trail running with, I think it was like a North Face group or something. There were these free weekend runs, and they take us on a bus or coach out to somewhere. I don't even know where we went. It was just out in the woods, out in the hills, on the outskirts of London somewhere. And I loved that. And that really took my focus off the actual running. Suddenly I was just in this scenery and with people, and I really loved that. And that's where my trail running began. And basically, I've never stopped since then, which was about probably 2015 or 2016.
And the heart of your story is how someone has lived a life in the city, following a certain path in life, but realizing and following that wasn't necessarily for them, that they had this urge to be somewhere different and do different things and not follow the standard societal norms, and put yourself in a position where you could wake up like a morning like today on a Friday morning and have adventure completely at your doorstep, getting rid of all the barriers of transporting yourself there and making it a special occasion. You have actually made it part of your day-to-day life.
Yeah, which is really, it's amazing to reflect back on, because when I was having those doubts about where I was and what I was doing, that was absolutely terrifying. It was my life there, and I'd set it up. I'd got everything that I wanted, or I thought I had. And it was really scary to think, if not this, then what? And I know how vulnerable that can feel, and not having the answers in your 30s, when you're meant to sort of be on this track of knowing where you are, and you've got maybe some good work experience, a degree behind you. And if you're in your 30s and you're going, I don't know actually what on earth I want to do for the rest of my life. I just knew that it wasn't sitting at that desk in London, looking out the window, thinking I'd rather be somewhere else. I just couldn't imagine myself doing that for another 30, 40 years. That wasn't a prospect for me. It wasn't feeding my imagination. It was comfortable. It was, I didn't have to do very much. I had to just travel to work, sit there, do the job and go home. And it's comfortable, but it's also seriously uncomfortable, because I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't thriving off it. In fact, I was suffering because I didn't get on with my boss, and she gave me a really hard time, and I was trying to do better. And I just felt like I was getting pushed back, squashed down. And that was affecting my confidence. I had anxiety issues. I was going to the doctors. I was taking time off work, calling sick all the time. This wasn't the human that I wanted to be. This wasn't the life that I was hoping to create when I was at university or when I travelled the world before uni. I wasn't showing up in life anywhere near how I wanted to be. But at the same time, I didn't know how else to do it when everyone else around me seemed quite happy with, working 9 till 5 or even longer hours than that, maybe in a partnership, having a family, getting a mortgage. And that to me just wasn't appealing at all. So it's really scary when everyone around you seems happy with that road, with that path. And I'm just questioning it. Yet at the end of it, I don't have an answer. I felt so lost. So to look back on that now is really reassuring, because I really did wonder if I was doing the wrong thing by leaving all of it. And I didn't do it lightly. It took me a good couple of years to think about it and consider about what I was doing. And at the same time, I suppose I knew that I could always go back to it. That's what I say to a lot of people who come to me for coaching now. It's just because you decide to leave, it doesn't mean that you can't ever go back. But who wants to go back to that? If you're questioning it, that's for a reason. That's a message that is in your body. It's like a trigger, but it's scary. It's really scary.
Well, you're someone who's gone on one of life's biggest adventures by taking a complete change of path in their career. It's something that I think many people can relate to, in maybe the fear that comes alongside the unknown of stepping out of a certain level of comfort that is providing you with a salary and a grounding, and in some sense also maybe a career trajectory that you can see ahead of you. But it might not necessarily be the trajectory or the path that people probably thought that they might be on in life. It just circumstances might have just come to be that they have fallen into the place, and then that's suddenly become a definition of who they are, when inside they don't feel like who they are. And after going on this adventure and taking off and doing something different, now you are giving back to other people by helping them facilitate the same within themselves. You are a life coach based up here in the peaks, doing something incredibly unique by actually doing some of your coaching out in the wilderness by going for a hike, mixing outdoor adventure with conversation and developing, I guess, changes in mindset, building confidence with people, understanding what's at their core, and being a facilitator and an enabler that might help them take that giant leap into doing something which they would otherwise be scared to do.
Yeah, and I think I love this work so much because I know when I meet those people, I can completely relate to how they look, how they feel. People come to me and they're so tired and they've got all these questions. They're worrying about so many different things. They're under so much stress and pressure, whether it's from themselves or from the people around them, their job. It's like people need a breath of fresh air. And that is literally what the guided walk provides. It's that completely different perspective. Some people have never been up a mountain before, certainly never been up on Kinder before. Even people who live in Sheffield haven't ever even considered going up there. So I think the walking and going up there, it helps them to see that they can do something they maybe didn't think they could do, or it helps people to grow in confidence. So it almost mirrors the process that they're going through with their life decisions and finding confidence in themselves, seeing different perspectives. But I think because I can relate to that, I was there. And not that I don't share my story with them, because the coaching sessions aren't about me, but it just means that I can offer that element of empathy towards them, and also to pick the questions that might get them past those worries and those concerns and those limitations that are completely clouding even knowing what they want. Because people do really know what they want. It's just they're too afraid to face it, to ask it, because they're so far away from where they want to be. Life has become so complicated that they don't know how to unravel it all. I mean, it's so scary, isn't it, to go and unravel your own life? Because once you start, you might not stop. And that's what happened with me. You know, I started looking at certain areas of my life. Initially, it wasn't about leaving London. It was like, okay, I need to get a new career in London.
While we're on the topic, let's take that time to delve into your story, because I think so many people can relate to that. And like you said, you've been able to use that to help others. So let's talk about your career when it first started. You had 10 years pursuing what you said was a sensible and stable career, but not necessarily on the path you wanted to go. What were you doing back then?
Well, I was exploring options. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I fell into a bit of working in the travel industry. And then I didn't really enjoy that as much as I thought I would. So then I tried working as a data analyst in the energy industry. And there were elements of it that I enjoyed. I mean, I did history at university, so I was quite good at research and I quite liked learning about different countries. I didn't particularly want to know about energy. Some parts of it were interesting, like sustainable energy and things like that. But if I'm honest, I just didn't know where to go, but I got good feedback in that job. So I thought, okay, well, this is probably where I should be. So that job as a data analyst, I stayed in for about 5 years. And the first couple of years were all right. I felt like I was doing well, but then it just all started to fall apart and I didn't know where to go next.
What was falling apart? What were the things that were happening at that time?
Like I said, I think it was partly my relationship with my new boss, which really challenged me. She didn't like certain things about me that she used to tell me that she didn't like that people liked me in the office. I think she had jealousy issues and she would directly tell me about that. And then she didn't give me my bonus. Everyone else in the whole company got their full bonus and I got it reduced because she said I wasn't reaching my targets, even though I had proof that I had. So then I went to the CEO and tried to explain what was happening and that I didn't feel like it was fair. And she just said, well, I trust your boss. I trust your manager.
Wow. It doesn't give you any confidence in your work, in your own self either.
No, and there was no HR. It was a very small trade association. So there was no HR to claim to. And I tried going outside of the company to get some help. But they said, unless you've got emails, unless you've got proof, and they said it's a really difficult road to go down to challenge this. I mean, the bonus wasn't big. I think it was like £500.
But it was the principle.
Exactly. It was someone against me who was giving me a hard time that felt completely unjust. And I really felt alone with it. And talking to colleagues didn't help. I felt completely powerless. You know, when you go to the CEO and they don't help you. And that's when I knew that I had to get out. But then I panicked and I wanted to get out as quick as I could. But I knew that I'd end up the same. I knew that I'd end up doing a similar job. It would be a similar setup. I mean, all of my managers I've been let down by, all of them. And you start looking at yourself and going, well, I'm obviously the problem here. But it just felt, the whole system just felt so unjust and I just couldn't stay in it. Yet at the same time, I didn't know what else I could do. You know, I was in debt. I had a credit card. I couldn't just leave. I mean, I could have gone back to my parents, but that just didn't feel right. In the end, I actually did do that. But I had a bit of a plan for how I would make that move from London. And I had some freelance work lined up, but it was a really hard time. If I think back, I can hardly recognise myself. I used to spend days in my flat with the curtains closed. I mean, I love the outdoors, you know, I love nature, I love light. And to think that I was withdrawing from life by closing the curtains, I was petrified to go to the shop. I really started to close in on myself. And I had an outlet, you know, I spoke to my parents, I spoke to friends about it being a problem, but they didn't know how to help me. And I didn't know how to help myself.
When you were having these problems with work, what was going through your mind in preventing you from just upping and leaving? Was it a case of knowing you had a salary, you had potential career progression, the comfort of all that? Or are there other things in play?
Yeah, I think it was the job that I was in was relatively laid back, almost too laid back. So I could just stay there. And actually I ended up working with some coaches because I just didn't know what to do. So I worked with a coach for about 6 months.
These are external coaches that you pursued yourself?
Yeah, so I'd been to a talk by a woman who actually lives, or she did live in Malawi, and she used to come over from Malawi to London to do these talks, inspiring talks, and to get some new coaching clients. And I was so taken by her story and the way that she glowed on the stage. I just looked at her thinking, wow, she is literally glowing, so beautiful, telling such an amazing story. So I really trusted her, and we had a discovery call, and I went and signed up with her, even though it was quite a big extra expenditure for me. It was £1,500 for 3 months of coaching, and my parents were a bit like, oh, are you sure that she's all right? And I was just, I completely trust her. So I took out a loan and paid for that. And it was the best decision I ever made. And then with the coaching alongside me, that really helped to facilitate that really difficult time in the workplace.
So she not only helped you understand a potential different direction, but she helped you cope with what you're going through there.
Oh, 100%. I mean, most of it was that, I think.
What kind of things was she helping you with? In what way was she helping you with that?
She was asking me questions like, what brings you joy? That was one of her first questions. And I didn't know. And that to me I felt really ashamed. I almost couldn't believe that I didn't know the answer to that question. I thought, who am I and what on earth am I doing if I don't even know what brings me joy? And I remember saying things, and she said, does that really bring you joy? Or are you just saying that because you think it should? And the truth was that I was sort of scraping the barrel, trying to think of things. And that made me realize how low I was. And she, rather than her just going, okay, then, well, we'll just have to move on, she encouraged me to think about what brought me joy when I was a child. And I grew up on a farm in Norfolk where I had so much freedom to play outside. I spent all of my childhood outside, basically. And the farm was so safe and so wonderful, farm animals, we had lovely dogs. It was an amazing place to grow up. And I loved walking. I loved walking with my mum, walking with the dogs. And so there it was, walking. That's what was missing. Even though I was walking around the same park every weekend, that spark of going to a different place, of a new place, of experiencing nature outside of the city, I hadn't been doing, which is really hard to think about now. I can't imagine how I got to that place of not enjoying nature. But so then I knew it was such a powerful realization that then I knew exactly what to do. And she didn't need to tell me. She didn't need to say, oh, so maybe you should go for a walk. I felt it. And that's what I did. I started going for walks, connecting with nature, but also it was time to connect with me, because by sitting on trains all the time, sitting on the underground and going around the same park all the time, I wasn't really having time to think. I wasn't being inspired by my environment to experience different things in life. I was just living the routine life. So I wasn't connecting with myself. And that is what walking and spending time in nature, and also walking with groups, allowed. It allowed me to experience who I actually am and help me move towards how I wanted to spend my time. But it wasn't overnight. This wasn't something that just happened all of a sudden. There was, when you're in a low place, it's really hard to put yourself out there, to start going for walks on your own, to start meeting people in groups, complete strangers. You're not in a good place, especially when you hate your job and you're thinking, oh God, people are going to ask me what I do for a living, and I'm going to have to try and make it sound interesting. There's all these layers, but I just took little baby steps.
Just jumping in briefly to say, if you've got this far, you're probably a fan of the show. And it would be great if you wouldn't mind confirming that love by following or subscribing to this podcast. It takes just one click from you, but it really does make a huge difference in getting more people to find this show. Thank you. So how did you build that confidence to kind of go from someone who felt really crushed in their workplace to then being more open with strangers whilst going on these walks?
Well, initially I started with myself, and I went for a walk in my local borough that was different to what I normally did. And I think sometimes it can be really good to add something to it. So rather than just going for a wander, I looked up a walk on the Discover Britain website, and I found this historical walk in Deptford, neighbouring Greenwich where I lived. And I loved it so much, following the walk, reading all about the history. It connected, I did history at university, so it connected with my love of history and getting to know places. So that, I started with just me and reading those directions. It's funny, I'm just thinking about how since then I've recently written the guidebook, which is, giving people directions, isn't it? So, it started there. And then I started to think, well, where else can I go? Because I think it doesn't take much, does it, to light the spark? It just takes, it can just be such a small little thing outside of your normal comfort zone. And that then it was like a lightning bolt, a little walk in Deptford that was just a bit different. And from there, because it felt so beautiful and I felt so connected, I wanted to share it. I wanted to say to the whole world, hey, you should all go and do this. Like, look up a walk in your local area and go and explore. I wanted to do it again. So that's what I did. I started to explore other areas of London that I'd heard about, like Epping Forest. I'd never been there before. And I found all these directions, it's completely accessible, free to find stuff online. And my whole weekends changed then. I stopped watching Come Dine With Me and sitting hungover on the sofa and doing the same walk. And instead, I started being more proactive about how I was spending my time. And it very naturally brought more confidence to me. And then when I started walking with groups, I realised that I was all right. I was all right with groups. I could speak to them. And often a lot of them had similar problems in their lives. They didn't like their jobs and they were looking for a bit of escapism. So suddenly it's like, not everyone's got it all sorted out, You can meet other people who have very similar problems in life.
It was very interesting near the beginning when you were talking about people who had houses and careers and all seemed happy, but actually when you really get deep into it, you can see that that's just sometimes a mask. And sometimes people can be living a certain way, which they think is appropriate to how they should be living. But deep within them, there is a bit of unhappiness or a bit of uncertainty or a bit of doubt into maybe some dreams that they didn't pursue. Is it quite humbling, or does it show how human we are when you're connecting with people and finding this common value to realize how widespread that problem is?
It is a really common thing. And I think a lot of people feel like they're always fighting. They're always chasing and fighting and trying to find some kind of certainty with their finances or with settling with a family, people being happy. And I think what I've realised over the past 7 or so years is that no matter what you do, things are not certain. They're not ever certain. But that's scary, isn't it? It's scary when you look that in the eye and you're like, okay, well, what am I going to do with this then? But then I think life becomes more of an adventure if you can see it through that lens.
If you embrace the uncertainty.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And want to open your mind and allow that experience to be mind-opening, and it might not necessarily lead you somewhere good, but it will rarely lead you somewhere bad, and you'll generally be a better person as a result of letting that in your life.
Yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily about taking completely crazy risks either. I don't know. It's like with the take the leap idea of just jack your job in and go and do this amazing thing. That might work for some people, but that it didn't feel right for me partly because I didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to be. So I don't think it is always about taking a massive leap. I think sometimes it's just about, it's about connecting with yourself and what you really want, and maybe what your partner or your family really want, and having those conversations And I think that's the thing is with coaching, it provides that environment, that safe environment to start having those kinds of conversations, to say, actually, this isn't the direction that I want to go in, or I've realised this thing that I'm doing, it's not worked out how I thought it would. It hasn't, I'm not feeling happy in this. I'm not saying you have to feel happy all the time. But it's like a general happiness, isn't it? It's like
it's the inner happiness, yeah. That there's a contentment with knowing that you're on the right path, and that understanding that your dreams won't happen overnight, but as long as you are on that path, that you can see your dreams coming into fruition, and they might be slightly different to whatever you imagine them to be. That says a lot more than being on a path that doesn't have any of your dreams considered and doesn't have any of your passions on there, and you're just doing something for someone else, to make someone else happy, to make someone else more money. I mean, I can relate to this from taking steps out of my life to do something different, where I'm pursuing, and I wake up every morning and I work on something that benefits me and not someone else. And I'd happily admit that I'm the happiest I've ever been, despite many other things that you could attribute to my life which don't have the kind of societal success involved with it. I don't have my own home. I'm certainly not grounded enough. And my career isn't very stable. But I'm so happy where I am now, knowing I'm on the right path. And as long as I put in the work, show up every day, just do that little bit, I know that I'll get to that destination. Whatever it will be different than what I imagine right now. But that destination is going to be something that'll make me more happy in the future.
So how do you know? How do you know that you're on the right path?
Oh, good question. Fundamentally, it's knowing, first of all, that I'm doing something that benefits me and not someone else. And I've chosen what I choose to do. And I've set in my, and sometimes, I mean, I'm a creative, so I have many ideas, and I believe I've had too many ideas many of which I never do. But it's the ones that don't go away are the ones which I believe are the ones I have to act on. And so there's various ones. The podcast is one of them. That was an idea that didn't go away. There's other things in filmmaking and in writing. And by taking a step out of a different direction in my life and going and focusing my energies and sculpting a life, I've created a life as well that allows this to happen, which I won't go into detail because it's not about me today. But by setting up that life, it does enable me to wake up every morning and move that dial a little bit further in the direction that I want to go and not where someone else wants to go.
I think it's interesting how you said that you feel like you're choosing it, because obviously we're all choosing. Even when I was in my data analyst job, I was choosing that, which felt, at the time, I didn't feel like I was, you know. And a lot of people say that to me when they come to me for coaching. It's like, I'm not choosing this. I don't want to go to that office every day, but actually we're all choosing it for whatever reason. Like you said, it might be like the salary, it might be paying off a mortgage, it's all those commitments. It might be because it's comfortable, you don't know what else to do, but it's still a choice. You know, we're adults, aren't we? And we're choosing that.
Yeah, and I think it's so often we're told, come out of uni, what do you do next? You need to find a job. And so you do that, and you look on the jobs markets, you apply for jobs, you think that's of interest, this company's of interest, and that just becomes the way. And this is very different and probably personal to me, but like, no one ever says, create your own job. What can you do? And also, I think you need a certain life experience, maybe. Many people that don't even go to university, setting up businesses and doing very popular. And business and enterprise, I believe, is a great form of adventure. Because what you're doing is you're creating something that is not there. And you're saying, I believe this needs to be in the world and I'm going to build it. And that in itself is an adventure, because that's a bold decision that you make to go down that path, when you could easily just slot into another company and just work for them and become a cog in that machine.
Yeah, and I think that wasn't ever presented to me as an option. I mean, I think maybe it is now with entrepreneurs and startups and things like that. I think the education system is hopefully changing a little bit, but then at the same time, that is a really tough thing to do, to set up a business and to keep that afloat and to get investment, you know, all these things. I mean, that is so much work. And I think if you really like work and you really want to do it, that's great. But actually, I've realised that I want a lot of freedom in my life, and I love the work that I do when I'm doing it. But to do that well and to come up with the creative ideas, and for me to feel like, yeah, I'm choosing my life, I really need that freedom to not be having to, I think actually having a business and employing people and things like that, that would take up so much of my life that I wouldn't want to. But I think, again, it wasn't presented to me as something that I would do in my future. And to be honest, I think even at school, after school, it wasn't anything that I ever really did, was to think for myself about what I might do, how I might spend my life. Like you said, there was so much pressure on getting a job. And of course, yeah, you know, you can't live in this society without some form of work. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't follow that advice.
Oh, and it's some people that they're happy with that.
Yeah.
That's they don't have a mindset where they want to go off and do something. And great, good for them. I'm not advocating that everyone should kind of go on their own adventure in enterprise. If they want, you know, a salary every month and, you know, private healthcare, dental plan, gym membership, all that benefits, pensions, fabulous.
And some people really thrive in that environment, which is amazing. And I just don't think I have the discipline. And I've always felt like it's a trap. And that's what happens, I think, is that you can get caught in it. I think it's that whole thing from such a young age, isn't it? We go to school. And of course, some people might view school as a really great experience. But I felt like it was a trap and that I didn't want to be there from a very, very young age. And I took that through into my adult life. I didn't want to be in that environment. And my mum tells me now, God, you know, I was a nightmare as a kid. I was always breaking out of pushchairs and I always wanted to be outside and running around. I wanted my freedom. I think it's just in my nature. And I always thought it was a bad thing, that there was something wrong with me. But what I realise now is that it's just me. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just how I am. And I think I was fighting it. I was thinking that I had to be something else. And then the messages, you know, from managers and things were, get back in your place, do this, do that. And I was never going to feel good in that environment. It's not because I'm some kind of pioneer or amazing leader. It's just that I like my freedom, and it's part of me accepting that and being okay with that I think I've come to.
Let's take it back to your story where you've found this new love for walking. You've set your weekends to have these great adventures going out, but I guess it still didn't resolve the core issue that you were still probably quite miserable in your job Monday to Friday and in your 9 to 5.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it was really fun for a while, and I suppose it was like a form of escapism. So I could do my hours at work and then go and make my sandwiches on a Friday night, ready to get on a train out of London on a Saturday morning and spend my weekend outside. And I mean, that sounds great, doesn't it? But after a while, well, firstly, it became very expensive because I was already living in London on my own. And it was really expensive to be going off every weekend. And then you have to buy all the walking gear. And I just thought, I don't know about doing this every single weekend. It almost became like a bit of an addiction, like I say, an escapism. And then when I first came to the Peak District, that was when my eyes really opened, because going back on the Sunday night, I just started asking those questions of, why am I going back to London? It's that question just came up. Why? And I hadn't questioned it before because I don't drive. I'd never learned to drive. And because of work, I mean, a lot of people say, don't they? Work opportunities in London are amazing. And I thought even for my coaching work, it would be amazing because I'd started coaching. I'd done my training by then. So I thought I'll still be in London. But then it was that question that came up. Why am I going back to London? Why am I in a flat that I'm paying £1,000 for each month that I'm not even spending my weekends in? And why have I got all this stuff that I'm not even using? These CDs and all these books, I wasn't even touching them. They were just collecting dust. So all those questions started to rise in me. And like I say, that was really scary because, well, where on earth am I going to go if it isn't London? But the question was there. And that's when I started to unravel everything.
You touched on actually that you were training to be a coach. We've kind of missed that bit out actually, but there was a point where your coach helped you facilitate the fact that you could also be a coach yourself. Let's talk a bit about where that came from.
Yeah, so because I'd been with these meetup walking groups, I'd had this idea that maybe I could lead some walks and come up with some adventures. I quite liked the idea. I think that's when I started to realise that there was some form of calling in me to be a leader. On the walks that I went on, that I was attending, I was always chatting to the leader. They inspired me. I thought they were amazing. I loved their confidence. It's like I wanted to be like them. And so then I started to think, well, maybe I could start designing some walks and start actually leading some. So I did. I set up my own meetup group. And then I started to think, initially it was obvious. It was like, well, why don't I just do this for a living? Why don't I train to be a leader? But then I realised there was so much involved in that. I'd have to get 40 mountain days, which just seems, I wasn't driving. I didn't have a car.
This is mountain leading.
Yeah, that I just had an idea, I thought.
And you can't do that in the peaks because the peaks aren't big enough for
exactly.
that. You have to go to the Lake District or Scotland.
Yeah, which just seemed, considering my finances at the time, that I was investing so much money into coaching and things, it was like, that just isn't going to happen. I just can't afford. So that seemed almost, well, it wasn't the answer that I wanted at the time because I wanted something more quick. I wanted something more quickly to get out of that job. So then I was still continuing to apply for these jobs in London, data analyst, travel industry stuff again, which was completely uninspiring. So then I thought, okay, well, maybe I can lead walks around London, within London, but obviously you still need some sort of qualification to lead people properly. But then I think my coach, Lucia, I think she was tearing her hair out because she one day just posed it to me that maybe I could consider being a coach. And I hadn't even thought of it, even though I admired her and appreciated her work. I hadn't thought, oh yeah, I can do that. And that planted something completely new inside me. And I just wasn't seeing it. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes when you're coaching, you can ask as many questions as you want to someone and they won't see it. They won't get there. So that little nudge from her, well, I mean, that's what I'm doing now. And so initially I said to her, like, how can I do that? I can't do that. I can't just be a coach. And so she suggested that I start trying and just offer free coaching to friends and things and see if I enjoyed it. And that's where it started. And I just, thinking back now, I think, God, where did I find the guts to do that? But I think I just really trusted her. I think she saw something in me that I think I wanted that deeper level of conversation with people. I loved taking people on walks, but I couldn't imagine myself doing that day in, day out. I was doing it for free at weekends to get people out of the city. Like I was, I wanted to be out there. So I thought other people might want to as well. So her coming up with that idea, that was a real changer for me.
So once that idea was put in your head, what made you believe that could be a genuine direction in your life?
Yeah, so I suppose it was a bit of a project, an experiment to begin with. And I didn't feel very confident in myself. I felt like a fraud, asking people questions about their lives. And also I felt a real heaviness with it. It was like I was really attached to the outcomes. I wanted them to go off and make the changes they wanted. It was like I was really invested in it. And that's because I hadn't trained as a coach. I was acting as a coach. I was trying to do what my coach was doing. And then one day I was just sat at work and I got this phone call and it was essentially a sales call. I don't know how they got my number, probably some coaching thing I'd started following. And this guy called me and straight away I was thinking, oh, how do I get out of this? But he asked me, like, how's things going with your coaching? He was assuming that I was a coach.
Great sales. Yeah.
And of course I was like, well, not great actually. And he seemed really interested in me. He was asking me questions. He was essentially coaching me in some ways. And so he kind of got me hooked in. And then he said, I've got this weekend where you can come and learn about coaching, learn how to coach, and you get a certificate. It's only 50 quid. And I was like, yeah, all right then. I wouldn't normally sign up to something like that, but I really connected with him. And I thought, why not 50 quid? And that weekend was completely life-changing. The two people running it, they're a couple. And the way that they led it, well, it wasn't just them teaching us how to coach. They were coaching us live, and we were coaching each other. And that's how we learn. And it was so powerful. It helped me make even more changes in my life in terms of my living circumstances and my relationship at the time. So that was so powerful. And I completely trusted them that I should take a further qualification with them. So there and then on the last day of the weekend, I signed up to their coaching course where I'd actually get a certification as a coach. And again, that was absolutely amazing, that experience it was like an intensive week that we did at Heathrow Airport in a hotel. And then after that, we had these weekend top-ups where we'd go and practice and learn extra tools. And I keep all of them with me. And I reflect back on that time. I mean, it was just incredible because I was meeting all these other coaches as well and people who were changing their lives. It was absolutely amazing. And it did cost because I was already paying to receive coaching. And then I was also taking out these loans. And it wasn't really making sense financially because I was getting myself into more debt. But I trusted it so much. I'm so glad that I did because I was always so cautious with money. So it was a big step for me to take, to trust in that. But I felt it.
That's
it was,
that fire inside of you.
Yeah.
And you were helping revive that fire. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really good coaching question as well. Is, to ask people, how can you get that fire inside of you going again?
Okay. How do people find what that fire is?
I think sometimes it is about going back and thinking about life before entering the world of work, because a lot of people kind of know what they really enjoyed while they were growing up, when they had time and space to imagine and dream. And I'm not saying you'll necessarily go back to being a vet or, you might have certain ideas when you're a kid about being a firewoman or a fireman or a vet. I'm not saying go directly to the job, but it's like go back to the feeling of when, and I'm not saying everyone had a happy childhood, so it maybe doesn't always work, but maybe there's something to go back to sometimes. And if not, then I would encourage people to get out of their zone, get out of what, I'm not saying career-wise straight away, but just to start meeting new people or to start working on a new creative project. People will often say, I'm not creative. And it's not true. I think everybody has something creative within them. It's just that they haven't explored it. And people often associate it with being good at something.
Yeah, it was a career, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and people might sort of think, well, it's just a stupid way of spending time. But it's time with yourself and it gives you confidence. I mean, I started with doing podcasting just as a bit of an experiment because I liked listening to people's stories and asking questions. And that's led on to, well, I was saying to you earlier, I could do it for the rest of my life every day. I absolutely love it. So I think there's different forms of creativity, but it's about meeting people.
Yeah.
And I think that's another really key thing is that people often get within a certain bubble. I think as you get older and older, it seems much harder to meet new people. and also more scary. So people tend to stay within their family unit or their friends unit. I'm not saying abandon them, but I think sometimes if you can just open it up a little bit more and connect with people who have similar interests, or go to some kind of creative class or something, and it just starts to open things up. And you've kind of got to find the fire by doing things that you don't normally do. Things that you're drawn to, but you always go, oh, I haven't got time for that, or it's just a stupid waste of time. I think actually invest a little bit of time in those things.
The advice you give on creativity, I think, is actually really, really important, because so much of creative work, whether it's, let's say, taking photos or sketching or journaling, writing poetry, none of it has to be seen by anyone else, and that shouldn't ever be the aim. To think that this work because you're doing the work, that it needs to be published, because that's what these professionals do in that arena of the world. There is a meditative state to doing that, that gives your mind a focus, that takes you away from all the other problems in the world, that you can just absorb yourself in that one activity to do for a few hours. And I suppose that's also what can help as well.
And it's amazing. I mean, you say like you don't need to share it, and of course you don't. But actually, sharing it has brought me so much joy. I mean, I was petrified of sketching because as a kid, I always thought I was rubbish. And I was more drawn to writing. I love writing. I always wanted to draw. And my sister's, she's really good at drawing. And my mum's quite good as well when she does it. And I wanted to do it, but I was absolutely petrified of seeing what would come out on the page. But actually, through sharing my perhaps childlike sketches, I've attracted people into my life who have helped me to learn new skills. Like Ali Foxon, for example, she talks about nature sketching. She's written a book about it, and she talks about the experience of sketching a bit like you did, about this sort of meditative state and not having to share. But she's really inspired me to spend that time outside and detach from it needing to be good. And actually, I have shared those experiences because they feel so good, and it doesn't have to be good to share it with other people. And then also there was an art teacher who spent a few hours with me at the Penny Pot Cafe in Edale, and he showed me some techniques, and I couldn't believe after 2 or 3 hours of being sat there how my drawings had developed so much under that tuition. And he just gave his time because I'd shared that I was sketching a little bit.
Right, yeah.
So it can actually welcome more people into your life and attract people who can help you to grow and to develop your skills, even though they're so much better than you at what they people want to share the skills, and those contacts are precious in life. It's like I'm finding the teachers I never had when I was a kid.
And I suppose the act of sharing your creative work actually could inspire someone else to pursue that as well, if they see that you're getting something from it, and they'll be like, oh, I've always been curious about having this creative side. You've inspired me to spend a few hours of my week setting some time away for that. And that can benefit people in a wider spread.
Yeah, I think also it can actually bring opportunities into your life as well, because of sharing my sketches. There's a guy who lives down south, and he does it as he's a designer by profession. And he's actually said, oh, I really like this drawing that you did. And he's encouraged me. And now he's asking if I want to collaborate with him on some work. These sketches, he's not asking me to contribute my sketches, but he will perhaps be sketching or drawing scenes from my environment, and then I'll bring words to it because he says he's not so good with words. And so it can actually bring about these new collaborations. I mean, I never expected that. I was just saying, oh, here's this picture of Tryfan, this sketch I did of Tryfan, because it's a way of me connecting with my landscape as well, that I've spent time in. Because you can go to a place and you experience it, and you take pictures and you have a great day, and that's brilliant. But then if you can go home and get one of the pictures out and really study it, and you draw in all the shapes that you see, I mean, that's just incredible. It's a whole other level of connection, and it makes that experience last because you're taking it home and then you've got it in a sketchbook for the rest of your life.
Isn't that a beautiful example of how the destination that you can arrive at from taking a step in a different direction could be something that you would actually never imagine at that time when you take that step?
Yeah.
And what opportunities can come your way once you're in a position where you can allow them in.
I think if you share things from your heart, even if you don't think they're particularly amazing, you know, they're not going to be things that are going to be put into print. But if you can share things from a place that feels true and unique and it's full of you, then I think my experience has been that, I mean, so many great things have come from sharing my life and my perspective and how I experience things. And I mean, there's so many examples of that, of the opportunities that have grown out of things when I haven't intended. I mean, what happens when you share something with intent, then you put so much weight on it and you maybe feel really disappointed when it doesn't work out as you expected. On the flip side of that, if you share things just because you love sharing them, because you enjoy it so much and perhaps it might help others, yeah, it's just incredible that opportunities can grow out of that when you're coming from a place that is just so genuine. But I do understand why people have doubts about it, because until you experience it a few times, you're never going to trust it, because we're told in the society throughout life, you've got to work hard to get to whatever place. I'm not saying don't work hard, and that's not true. You know, I feel like I do work hard still, but I don't think it's always like an end-to-end beginning, you know, like you don't just begin with that and end with that. It's not guaranteed. Sometimes things come your way through flow and through creativity and connection.
And they'll always be different to what actually you can imagine.
Yeah.
I guess this also highlights the importance of having diversity when you set up your own business, I suppose. And this is, I guess, something that you've done as a career coach, that you've set up a business which is kind of you. But once you take that step where suddenly you are your own brand and you are your own kind of boss in a sense, it allows you to kind of explore what else can come in your way, which might be slightly differently. And the importance of having that diversity when you are a sole trader or freelancer on your own. You talked about podcasting that you've done, your sketching and how that's leading to work. We'll talk coming up in a bit about the book that you've written as a guidebook around some of the walks around Kinder. But isn't that another beautiful example of what could happen once you step out of working for someone else, that then suddenly you're allowed to kind of explore a whole range of opportunities? Yeah,
and actually I had to take a break from all the noise around me, because I had this, once I moved to Edale and I already had my coaching qualification, I had this idea of walking out with people on these coaching sessions. But I was looking for the answers from other people. And actually what I do, other people aren't generally doing. But I was going to all these networking events in the city. I was signing up to courses about how to sell yourself and all this stuff. And I was hiring an office in Sheffield. It's funny looking back now, because I suppose I was still in that sort of London mindset. And being sold to, essentially, people telling me how I should run my business. I don't really call it a business, but it is, I suppose. And I was being taught things and I would try them out, but it didn't feel right. It all felt too salesy and it just wasn't me. It was just it had this real like city sort of vibe to it, and trying to sell yourself as a coach and tell people that they can do this and they can do that. And it just didn't fit with me at all. So I took a complete break and I said, right, I'm going to stop going to all these events about how to be a great coach and earn millions of pounds and all this stuff. And that was a really good thing to do. And I got some pub work as a housekeeper, and I did some cleaning jobs around Edale Village, and that was so amazing because I started to meet people around the village. I got dog walking work. I loved working in the pub because I could start at 7, finish at midday or whatever, cleaning rooms, and then have the afternoon free. And so it was so good to have that break, but it really helped with my confidence because I was around people a lot and I was meeting people in the village and really getting to know the community, which I absolutely love. So I started to really immerse myself in Edale and less so in Sheffield. And that really, really helped me to detach from all this kind of sales talk that just felt completely uncomfortable. And that's when I found the space within myself to start exploring how I wanted to reach people, not as a salesperson, not to make millions of pounds, but actually to help people who were feeling really unhappy in their jobs and really unsettled and asking all the questions that I had been when I lived in London. And so that's why I started to do the podcast. And I could do that because I had work. I had work coming in, so I wasn't pressurized to make sales as a coach. And then from the podcast, I started a newsletter that was asking coaching questions. And so it all happened really beautifully and without this sales talk and approach that just didn't sit right in, it's like a feeling that you have that you feel like you're trying so hard.
Kind of cold calling almost.
Yeah, it's like a falseness about
it.
it.
Instead you were building a brand, which were going to be the foundations for your career.
Yeah, but it wasn't, I didn't particularly have a plan. I actually just really wanted to interview people because I'd started meeting people around the area and I was personally interested in their stories. And I thought their stories, and at the end of each podcast episode,
we should mention what your podcast is, by the way.
Yeah, so I've got 2. One of them is about the adventure, which is about the adventure of career change. And I interview people about just asking, how has it been for you? Can you tell us about the challenges? And I tend to ask people who are at the beginning stages because I think there's so many of these stories where someone's become a millionaire or they've written a bestseller book. And I'm not saying those stories don't count, but capturing stories when they're in their really early stages, I think is really great because then the people who I'm working with can relate to what might be happening in their life when they start to make those changes, those early on changes. So yeah, with About the Adventure, it was more about my personal interest and how that might help other people. And then at the end of each episode, I ask each of my guests to ask a question. It's not necessarily a coaching question, but it's a question that can help people to think about things differently. So rather than giving advice at the end and saying, you should do this, you should do that, it's just a question, like an open question for people to go away with at the end of the episode so they can start that process of thinking for themselves.
It's a question for the audience. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I had that idea and I love it. And I was just thinking this morning when I was running, I was thinking maybe I should collate all of them into a document. So then you've got like 25 or so questions that you could actually use to make some changes in life.
So that podcast is about people taking a career change, About the Adventure, and your second one
is Wild About Kinder, which is interviewing people who connect with the mountain that I live beside. Because I realised by doing my navigation course and meeting people and learning about the moorland landscape, there's a lot of people who connect with Kinder in a really deep way that's really significant. It's a mountain that people return to time and time again. Not everyone. Some people, in fact, hate it because they've been there in bad weather, or they hate the bogs and
it can be very boggy.
They hate the weather. But there are some people who connect with it in a similar way that I do. And part of the reason that I do, I think, is because I live there and it's been part of my journey of change. It's helped me. It's been a place where I've asked myself questions about my life and made some massive changes. So I have that connection with it. But others who don't live there and haven't made a career change love the place through different lenses of creativity, of working there. Edale Mountain Rescue, there's so many stories of this place. And I think I could spend my lifetime interviewing people. There's no way I could capture them all, but I wanted to make a start. And there is a smallish community of people who love that show because it speaks to them, because they feel the same about Kinder and why it makes it so special.
It just sounded really interesting. What a great example that is of, rather than when you first have taken this, what eventually became a giant leap, but you said it happened in small stages. But once you were in a completely new environment with a new job, with not many business prospects at the very, very beginning of that, rather than wait for work or be hustling, trying to get the wrong type of work, you created something that would help you integrate in your local community and also allow you to do some of your coaching in some sense, and that use that experience with how you approach a conversation with someone and talk to them, especially with the About the Adventure podcast, something that aligns with your brand and what you, so that gave you a great way to set up a foundation and do something active from day one.
Yeah, and like I say, it wasn't a grand plan. This is all panned out. And I should also mention as well that it wasn't just a case of leaving London and moving to Edale. I left London with the intention of getting some work as a bushcraft skills teacher, activity leader type of thing in Hertfordshire, I think it was. That was my summer plan, and then to do whatever I was going to do next. But I didn't enjoy the training and I left, and I'd already left London by then. So I went back to my parents' house, who were on holiday, and sat on the sofa and gone, oh, what am I doing now then? I'm living back with my parents, who very kindly took me back in. And yeah, I wasn't sure what to do, but luckily I got a freelance gig on my doorstep. One of our family friends gave me my first freelance job, and then he recommended me to someone else. And because I'd started making my own coaching website and things like that, I'd picked up a few extra skills and people that people needed. So that's how that started. And I spent about a year back with my parents. I did a bit of traveling. I found some amazing opportunities for travel. I went to Georgia to go and volunteer to build some of the Trans-Caucasian hiking trail that's still being worked on there. Put that on my credit card because I had to pay to do it. And then I also got an amazing opportunity to go to Bosnia, which just came through a Facebook connection. And so I went to Bosnia and Herzegovina and spent a week traveling around. And then through the Yes Tribe, which I know you've got some connections with the Yes Tribe, I had an opportunity to go and live down south and dog sit. So I lived there for a month. So I was moving around, I was meeting people, and I was really happy. But then I kept going back to Edale because I'd been there once or twice before. I was planning on taking some of my meetup group for walks there. But I kept going back with trail running, and I signed up to a race, and yeah, just kept going back. And so the reason that I actually had the opportunity to live there was because I met my now ex-partner, and he said, do you want to come and live with me? So I did. So it wasn't a case of just leaving London and, renting a house in Edale. That just wasn't the story. It was, that's how it panned out.
A very long transition period where you were transitory, I guess, floating, finding where you might next land. You didn't actually know where that was at that time.
Yeah, and I did feel like it was a bit of a risk because I didn't know my ex-partner that well at the time. But we said, like, let's just try it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And yeah, we had a great 5 years together. And that's how I came to actually live in Edale. And now I'm doing my absolute hardest to stay there because I love it there so much. I love the community. I love, and
just as we started as well, just having that completely on your doorstep, that you can wake up in the morning and be like, oh, it looks great outside. I'm going to run up those hills and get a fantastic view. And what a great way to start the day. You talked about the cost of when you first got a coach. I know a lot of people who will commonly invest in a health and fitness coach. If they are looking for a certain marathon time, because I know a lot of runners, they will give a coach loads of money per month to coach them to get to their goal marathon time, or just to kind of get them coached to be able to run a marathon. And why is it that someone will happily coach that side of their life, but rarely think about the professional side of their life and the benefits that a coach can bring there?
It's a very good question. I think because of the depths that it will take you to, like I say, it's potentially going to be an unraveling.
Could it be uncomfortable?
Yeah, definitely. Like, it can be really uncomfortable because you're perhaps saying things that have passed in your mind, or that you feel that you've never expressed, maybe even to your closest friend or your partner, because it's not just it's often not just a risk you're taking for yourself by questioning your life and your decisions. It's often going to be affecting other people as well. So to say it out loud is a really, really, really brave thing to do. And actually, some people come to my sessions and they didn't know that's what was going to come out.
And I guess it's not always from a professional sense either.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're a life coach.
Yeah.
And I should clarify that, because I think I've been using the word career coach, but actually a life coach is different. Like, you do obviously address people's careers, and you have that own experience in your life, but it could be personal stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And often that is what's going on, or that they want to change their career. Well, it's not just about career, it's about lifestyle, because a lot of people who I work with want more freedom to spend time outdoors. And to say that to a partner, for example, that is wanting to have a nice house and to have secure income and maybe to have children and things. I often work with people who are at that stage of making that decision to have children. It's really scary then to talk to your partner about it, isn't it? It's to say the truth of what you're feeling, rather than working harder or getting a better paid job. They're actually thinking, I want more freedom. I want to step back from this pressure and this corporate environment. So again, it's so scary. And also with coaching, with this style of coaching, the results, they're not certain. You know, it's not like I give people a program to work with. I'm not an expert on what they're doing. I'm literally facilitating them through questions to arrive at the core truth of who they are. That's really scary. I mean, how often in life do you get the opportunity to do that without someone trying to rescue you or give you advice? It's so rare, and it is so scary to do. And like I say, it can be like a domino effect. So once you start looking at one area, other things come up, and you might start questioning your whole life, where you live, your environment, how you're parenting. Like, there's so many layers to our lives and to making those everyday choices. So I never take this work lightly. And I also will only go as far as that person wants to go, and I'll check in with them and say, do you want to keep talking about this? And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they've got scared and they'll say, no, I want to move on to something else. And I completely respect that.
It can be uncomfortable to have the uncomfortable conversations for fear of the upheaval, the consequences of that might have in your life. In the example you've given with someone in a relationship who perhaps wants a different path, but that also has to come from a second person. And if those paths aren't aligned, or if those mindsets aren't aligned, then that kind of can bring two people to arrive at a point where they start wondering if they themselves are right to be together. And that could be the biggest change in anyone's life. especially if, I mean, I can relate to this after being in a relationship for 13 years with someone, and coming out of that nearly 2 years ago now, that I personally, I buried the uncomfortable conversation so many times. And even though there was a burning, not necessarily burning desire, but even though there was a deep feeling inside that something wasn't right, it was more comfortable not to address it. And it's not until now that I've realized that I could have used a life coach when I was having those feelings and thoughts, because I didn't know who I could talk to. Because I knew if I talked to my partner about this, it could be a slippery slope down a one-way path that could lead to separation, which I wasn't sure at the time was something I knew. And I didn't know anything about a life after that. And it's just, I think I've not realized until now the benefit I could have had for both of us to have had that conversation with someone independent. Because that in itself, and let's talk maybe a bit about relationships here, that's a hard conversation to have with anyone close to you, because you might not be ready to have that conversation with your partner, and you might feel uncomfortable having it with friends, especially if they know both of you very well, and you wouldn't maybe want to share that kind of vulnerability with friends. And you might also not want to talk to family. And even so, your friends and family might be the worst people that can give you advice on something like that. You would need someone completely independent.
Or just not advice at all. Because people can give you advice all the time. And a lot of people mistake coaching for advice. And that is not what I do. It's about, you know, like you said, you weren't sure about whether it was going to change your relationship, whether you were going to separate. And so through coaching, it's going to those places that you're not quite daring to go. It's like, rather than burying them, it's asking those kind of questions that will help you to decide whether, when and if you're ready to have that conversation with your partner and to take those next steps. So as a coach, I wouldn't be giving you advice and telling you how to have those conversations. It's more about, my focus would be on you and what you want, what you weren't getting, receiving, giving in that relationship, how you weren't showing up how you wanted to, and what needed to happen for you. So it would be very much helping you to get to those answers that were really difficult to get to when you're trying to protect another person, and it's all just in your head. It's when you're saying things out loud, especially in an outdoor environment, there's so much clarity that comes with that. And with me being completely impartial to the results and what you decide, then you're in a completely safe space to explore wherever you need to go. And some people some people burst into tears in the first 20 minutes from the pure relief of just having someone say, how are things going for you right now, without stepping in or distracting myself. Because the thing is, as a coach, I have to be in a place where I'm sort of ready for anything, for what people are going to come up with. And it's not my job to rescue people. It's to give them the space to hear themselves.
Can I put you on the spot? Can I take you back to a time in my life when I felt like I needed coaching the most? What would be your approach for me coming to you by saying that I'm feeling like I may want to break out of a long-term relationship, but I'm not sure, first of all, if I want to have that conversation with my partner?
So I'll start by asking you, what do you want for yourself right now?
Do I have to answer this? No,
looking back to then.
Yeah,
obviously.
well, I have to go back many years, because this is deeply personal, and
you don't have to share it. We can just go with the question.
Because also, it means to protect the privacy of someone else.
You can make something up if you want.
No, but I think I should talk from the heart. I think. Can you ask that again for me, please?
What do you want for yourself by thinking about this change in your life? What do you want for yourself and for your future?
I want to feel confident knowing that I can tackle any of life's problems with my partner. And that's what I don't believe is something I have now.
So, how would it be different for you if you were on your own?
At this stage, I will have had so long with now my ex that I would not even know what life is like on my own. And that utterly scares me. I cannot even imagine. And I've since, gone through a 2-year journey of exploring what that means. And, by jumping in that deep end. But at that time, couldn't imagine our life. And to give you context, there was so much good in that relationship that feels like that I feel scared of losing something that I might never get back again.
So why do you feel like you can't resolve problems in your life with that person by your side? How is that limiting you?
Because I feel that the other partner, the other person, cannot has a different mindset that cannot be compatible with the same problem solving or I guess the ability to make I guess, let me start that again. I guess the other person, I feel like they can make problems worse. I'm also not sure if this is a great direction. How are you feeling with this? Sorry.
I'm feeling fine.
Okay,
this is what.
great.
No, this. I think it's
okay.
It's interesting to see how you're experiencing it, and it's really uncomfortable, isn't it?
It's so uncomfortable because, and I know she will never listen, but friends might. It just feels like this is the conversation that two people have in privacy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is being published onto the internet.
And also you're thinking back to a time that was really difficult for you.
And I think I can go back to that place. It's still very, it's a decision that I've since made and I'm very happy with, even though it was hard work at the time. But I suppose there's maybe just a self-consciousness of the place that we're doing this and the platform that we're choosing. But I also just, I guess I'll leave this in because I think it just shows about the uncomfortability of it. But am I feeling uncomfortable because, these red lights are flashing and we're recording and I know it's going to be broadcast? Would this be completely different? I know it probably would be if we were out on a walk together in the open countryside or in a private room without these microphones on. But I can still sense that it would be uncomfortable with me trying to put it into words to someone by also choosing to not discredit the other half and to to know that I obviously have my opinion on them, but I also would realize that they also have an opinion on myself, and to try and just respect that part of the relationship and know that it's not all on her, but it also, some of it could be on me. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the things that people say to me in this environment are things they've literally never said out loud to anyone before, because these aren't everyday conversations. Everyday conversations about partners might be, oh yeah, that was really annoying, or I don't know how to deal with that. And I mean, this is really deep work. And the thing is that the focus isn't on you and her or her at this time. For the sake of this conversation, it's about you. And it's like you're being fully seen, fully heard by me, but also by yourself. And it's a really powerful thing, because it's almost like you're showing up for yourself. You're saying, this is the truth for me, even if it hurts that other person. This is how I see things. And I mean, my next question would have been, are you willing to compromise on that need for yourself?
And would that be about working together to continue a life together that would involve the fact that I would still have an element of what I potentially wasn't happy with at the start still in my life, in order to kind of continue going forward together?
It could be. That would have to be up to you. So it wouldn't be something that I would be advising you on. Again, it would. So I might ask you, are you willing to compromise on that, as in give that up? And then you might say something like, well, it's really important to me. I can't go on in this relationship without that happening. And so then I might ask you, what needs to happen? Do you need time away from that relationship, or something else? Do you need to have a conversation? What needs to happen next? And so then it's up to you to decide. And initially you might have a conversation, but then that conversation might not go the way you wanted to, because that person might respond in a way that is angry, or they might be very upset, or they might say, are you asking us to separate? That's people panic, and they start putting pressure on, what does this mean for us? People start to feel insecure, and then it can all kind of blow up. So then people maybe need support with that communication side. And actually, if you can't work through it, again, you come back to that question, are you willing to compromise on this? And it might be, actually, no, I can't. Like, I can't be in a healthy relationship if I'm compromising on something, on that partner being with me on things and working through things together. So then it is about taking that scary step of perhaps stepping away. And it's the same in careers. You know, sometimes you have to step away from a job, even if there's some things that are good about it. And it's really scary, especially when you're doing it yourself. You know, someone else isn't saying, right, we're making you redundant, or I'm finishing with you. I'm not saying that's any easier. But when you're unpicking your own life, I think it can be really good to have someone beside you who isn't going to say, you're ruining your own life by doing this, or you've got a lovely house, why would you give that up? You know, people start making you doubt yourself. That's what friends are for, it's fine. But sometimes it helps to have someone outside of that circle pointing out all the good when you're feeling the bad.
Yeah, maybe I'll leave it in.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't expecting that. I love how these conversations can go.
You obviously have it's nice because you obviously have like a genuine curiosity about it.
Well, it just struck me in the conversation. It was like, oh, of course, this is not just about changes of path in a career. This is also just and having gone through my own life experience and realizing how, and that took me years to process that. And even when I had that last conversation, you know, I wasn't sure what was around the corner. I didn't know we would be breaking up, or I probably wanted that deep down, but never wanted, typical lad, probably just didn't want to put that into words.
Well, I was the same. Last year, I broke up with my partner and I was so scared. And it took him pushing me, saying, what's going on? And And I just tried to make excuses. I'm writing a book, my head's distracted, because I wasn't sure how to approach the conversation. I was scared that I was questioning our relationship. So yeah, it took him to keep prodding me and saying, what's going on? Like, what's up? Like, and then we had that really hard conversation. So it's like, because I wasn't sure either. I wasn't sure if I wanted to end things with him. And I was also scared of, like you said, what came at the other end of that. Where would I live? Where would I go? I'd miss the person that was closest to me. They wouldn't be there every day coming home from work. It's devastating sometimes.
There's that comfort, yeah, just like a career.
I didn't want to hurt him either. He's such a lovely person. I didn't want to hurt him, but unfortunately.
You can have a lot of love with someone, but not be in love with someone. And you can have that care and respect, even when breaking up. And I like to think that my story is a great example of that. Even though it's still hard, and even though you're still breaking someone's heart, and you're breaking your own heart, and you're causing all this wake in an action, which many traditionalists would be like, why? Why have you caused all this pain?
And that's what if you're breaking up with your partner, they'll often say that to you. Why are you doing this to us? And it feels terrible. But I have to say that I've been working with a therapist, so I've had therapy for over a year now, and that's helped me so much, and to trust my decision, especially during times when it was just so upsetting and so hard. It felt really good to have someone impartial to talk things through with, so that I felt reassured that I was doing the right thing for myself.
How do you help coach someone through that fear of the unknown, or if it's a changing career path, that fear of failure, the fear of leaving this zone of comfort, which they've grown to just, I mean, they're not flourishing, but they're surviving, very nicely, to go down the path which they have no idea actually really what's down. That is the scariest decision anyone can choose to do, and that's why it can be so uncomfortable. How do you help coach someone through that?
I ask, what will you do if, or what will you do when? And I just keep asking that question, and people always have an answer, because I think we're naturally survival. We naturally know how to survive. And so I might say, well, what if that doesn't work out? Because that's what they're scared of, like you say, all those worries about money, failure. Sometimes people are even worried about success, like, well, what if I really have to commit to this thing? What if it really takes off? That can be really scary, having to show up in a new way that maybe isn't hiding behind a desk and it's showing up as a mountain leader, for example. Then you have to go and do it once you've trained, and that's really scary. That's a whole other level. So what will you do then? And people always have an answer. It's like, well, what will you do if that doesn't work out? Well, I'll probably just get a job in a pub or something. And I go, oh, well, great then.
So you're painting all these scenarios that could happen, which is helping someone understand all the different avenues which they may end up being on. Some of them may be worst case scenario, but it's helping someone visualize that. Yeah,
and actually, I'm not actually the one painting. It's them, because I'm just asking the questions.
Right.
It's like, what will you do then? And they have the answers. They'll say, oh, well, we'll live off our savings for a bit. And how do you feel about that? Well, it'll be absolutely fine. I mean, they're just sitting there. That's what they're for. Or they'll say, oh, actually, my partner's got a really good job and he'll support me. Of course, there's some people who don't have that. They don't have anything to lean on. Maybe not parents to lend them money. Maybe they're literally thinking. And then it's a whole other type of risk if you haven't got anything to fall back on. But usually people will say, well, I don't care if I have to take a job that is just going to pay the bills for a bit. Most people are willing to take that risk. And actually, I mean, some people do say that they don't want to take steps back, especially if they've been in quite a high level corporate style career. But then it's asking them about their health. Well, what impact is that job having on you? And there's been people that have said that they've nearly stepped in front of a train because of the stress I mean, that is just hugely, well, it's so upsetting, isn't it? That someone can feel so pressurised by their job that they have those considerations. So then suddenly having a part-time job or a temporary job, doing something else. I'm not saying that working in a pub or working in Tesco is necessarily any less stressful, but it's people will find a way, and sometimes you just need to have a break from what you're doing to get a breather. And if people really love their idea of what they're going to do instead, they'll probably find a way of making it work. You know, it's even if it doesn't work first time, they'll apply for some funding somewhere else, or they'll knock on another door. There's so many possibilities in this life, but we don't believe that because we rarely take the risks that are there for us to see, to experience.
Well, one of the things you've been able to do by allowing yourself to go on a different path in life is be open to more opportunities. One of these opportunities has enabled you to combine your love for hiking, for the love of the local area of Kinder, to create a guidebook, which is something that got published this year. It's called Mountain Walks, Kinder Scout. 15 routes to enjoy on and around Kinder. There are photos, descriptions, maps, everything you need to go on a hike around the Kinder area.
And you can download the routes as well. They've got the GPX files when you buy the book, so you can follow it as well if you've got phone signal.
It must have been quite an adventure just even creating that and getting out and having to know that you are responsible for someone to kind of follow your directions word by word, and the detail that you need to put into that must have been quite a lot of work.
Yeah, again, it was a really scary thing. It's one thing saying yes to an amazing opportunity like that. It's such a different feeling when you sit down and look at it. And actually, that was a mistake that I made. Well, I wouldn't say much a mistake, but more of a learning curve, which I suppose most mistakes are. But I was so focused on the sitting down bit to begin with. I was basically in panic mode, thinking, where do I start? How am I going to do this? When actually I'd been provided with a very good template of what they were expecting, like a template of a walk description that ended up being in the book. And yeah, I was really petrified, and I thought, I'll sit down at my desk and make a plan. And that just made me feel even more petrified and also just not very inspired. Sat at a desk going, where do I start with this? So I had to rethink the whole thing because I was getting really stuck. I was really in my head about the whole thing. I was just thinking, I need it to be good. I need it to be accurate. This has got to be the best thing I've ever done. All this pressure was building up in my head. And so I had to, again, I suppose it was like taking a break from it, even though I hadn't really started. I was like, I need to go for a walk. And so that's what I did. I started walking, and that's how I developed the routes. And I thought I suppose it was kind of like my office or business head was thinking, you've got to start with the words and a plan, and nah.
No,
that isn't how I work.
You need to be out on the trails.
Yeah. I need to be dreaming, imagining. So I started thinking about, what was it like when I first came here? What did I experience? What directions would have helped me when I got lost on my first walk on Kinder Scout? And that just felt, everything just flowed from that place then on, and I grew in confidence, even though I wasn't getting feedback because I hadn't shown anything to anybody. I really started to feel more confident in myself because I was coming from that place of, how were people going to experience this book and experience those walks?
How did you manage to make sure that this experience that people could have would be as easy to follow as them doing the walk themselves, knowing where they were going?
Yeah, I don't think it can be easy. I think anytime you have a guidebook in your hand, or you're looking at a map route, it's never going to be easy, because actually what you want is to have complete freedom to wander and to play and to experience the views and the wildlife of the mountains. It's like the last thing people really want when they're walking is to be focusing on a phone or a book. So I think it is quite a tricky thing because people have to focus really hard. But then I think how I've tried to make it more enjoyable is that rather than just being a turn left, turn right, do this, do that, I've tried to actually encourage people to look up and say, you might see a kestrel here over Grindsbrook. You might, if you look up, maybe take a tea break here. This is a really good boulder to sit on. So I've tried to encourage people to take a bit of a break, a bit of a lift, and look up and look around, and also through the different seasons, so that it isn't just like, a step-by-step thing. I want people to feel like they've got someone with them, because they're pointing things out and saying, look at this, look at that.
Yeah, you're not just directing people through the land, you're directing them how to use the land.
How to experience it, yeah. Yeah, like, and in the ways that I do. And the reason that I can do that is because I've trained as a hill and moorland leader. So if I feel like I have those skills and I carry all this safety gear with me.
And you live there.
Yeah, I live there. So
you live and breathe all those trails.
Yeah, every day. Well, more or less every day. I'm not saying, like some people say, oh, you must be an expert. I wouldn't ever call myself an expert. I'm quite new to this, and there's many more people who have amazing skills and knowledge of Kinder and the history of the area, more advanced than mine is. But it's a place that I'm learning more and more and more about.
But I mean, comparing yourself as a thief of, comparison is a thief of joy. And to compare yourself to anyone else is actually doing yourself injustice, because you should have the confidence to say, yes, I have been here years. I do know this far more than the kind of typical trained tourist who comes in for a day hike. Yes, I'm willing to share, and I'm confident to say this is an excellent route for this occasion, for this season, for this view.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also about, you can get tricked by the seasons on Kinder, because you can think, oh, it's May or it's June, it's going to be a glorious day, and you can be up there absolutely freezing if there's a wind chill. So we've tried to put that in the book. The publisher encouraged that as well, like taking those safety precautions, looking really closely, not just at BBC Weather for Edale, but for the mountain weather forecast, and looking at what's happening in Scotland and, these other areas of what's filtering down to our Kinder.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I guess it all comes down from the Pennines, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Looking back at the version of yourself when you were in London, stuck in a career which you just didn't ever feel that you could flourish in, do you ever consider yourself that you'd be a published author of a guidebook for walking in a place that I guess you'd never been to at that time, or couldn't remember going to?
No, not in a million years. No chance.
What an achievement that is, having a physical copy of a book that's got so much of your life in it, actually, really, from what we've talked about, of how you've been able to take step in a different direction and use walking, which was that initial fire in your belly. You had no idea what that fire would become, but you knew that you needed to feed it. And then the book is a great example of what can come from allowing that fire to burn.
Yeah, and I really trusted in that, and I trust in it now. I have this deep trust in myself, and it's not to say that I never have doubts and that I'd never wake up and think, oh, what am I doing? But this morning at the start of my run, I said to myself, because I was thinking about, because I do some freelance work to support my coaching work and projects, podcasts, etc. And a bit of it is piling up at the moment, and I've got a few mountain days coming up. And I was worrying. I was thinking, I need to cancel the fun stuff to do the work stuff. And I said to myself, just as I started going uphill, I said, I can totally do all of this. I can do it. I said to myself out loud, I can do it. I've done it before. And it's because I want to. I want to do all of it. It's not because I have to. I actually want to. And so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it over the next few days. I'm going to go walking with my friends over the weekend. I'm going to fit my work in. I'm going to go for meals, go to the Lake District Monday, Tuesday. And I know I can do it. It's just sometimes the mind takes over and you start getting scared. And that doesn't go away. But I think the more that you prove it wrong, the stronger the trust and confidence in yourself builds.
And I guess it really highlights the power of just going for a walk.
Yes, exactly. Oh my God, yeah. You said it. That's exactly it. And that's another thing that I trust in. Even if I've got things piling up, if I've got 10 podcasts to edit, it's like, well, I'm going to be doing a lot better. I'm going to be feeling a lot better. It's going to come out a million times better if I take that little bit of time out for myself first. I sort of can say to people, like friends and things, is to start your day with yourself. You know, so many of us leave ourselves until the end of the day, and it often gets missed. You think, I'll read that, I'll go for the walk, I'll do that later. The dog, the kids, your partner, your friends, we're responding to other people's needs all the time. And I'm not saying don't do that, but if you can start with yourself, even if it means getting up half an hour earlier, that can completely change your whole day. It means you never get missed out, and it means that you can show up so much better for everyone else in your life because you've looked after yourself.
Well, I think that's a great way to finish it. Some lovely advice. I feel, Sarah, I could talk to you for hours, just getting advice from you, but also tackling my own life's problems, which I'm sure is not what people want to hear. But I'm certainly glad we had that moment, I guess, to kind of realize that those uncomfortable conversations need to come out. And you're obviously a great facilitator of that.
I just like to provide the safety that people need, that environment to be able to say things out loud without judgment, without someone dropping in the advice. I mean, it's so precious and so powerful. I feel that I'm very privileged to be at the receiving end of what they have to say and showing up for themselves.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to find out more information about any of the guests, please check out the show notes, where you'll also find links to things mentioned in the conversation. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a look through the past recordings. There's so many more incredible stories for you to find, and I can't wait for you to enjoy them. Thank you.